So welcome everyone. It's delightful to be here today on this important topic about how to network for your job success in a post-COVID world. First of all, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping, just ask that everybody can just click their chat window just to let me know that they're here with a, well, that's great. Good to see. Thanks so much. And just thought what I'd do is, yep, that's great. Okay, let's get into it now. And just bear with me as well whilst I get used to the technology here. It's a little bit new to me, and just if you can be a little bit forgiving, that'd be wonderful. So I'm Greg Weiss. I run Career 365. I've authored a few books, most recently that one. That's actually been rewritten, and it's for a post-COVID world. And the third book that I've written is a book about networking for job success. And it's something I've noticed that when I'm interacting with people as their coach through Career 365, that what I've found is that in helping people really get into the networking piece, that it's huge leverage for them in getting into a job that they may not have otherwise known how to get into. And so today I'm going to give you a short introduction into the essence of what networking is about, a few things that might be quite new to you and to think a little bit differently. But it's the first part of several parts that I'd like to be able to share with you because of the importance, particularly in this environment, to do network as far as networking is concerned. So networking is really important because would you believe that 80% of the jobs that people get to date, 80% are because of who they know, not necessarily what they know. So if you imagine a pyramid, or let's actually a better analogy, an iceberg with a waterline. They say that 20% of an iceberg is above the water and 80% is below the water. And it's the same thing with the job market. 20% is advertised, is known, is visible, but 80% is under the water. And through networking, and networking effectively, be able to help to uncover some jobs that will be right for you. That's why networking is very important. I want to just ask your permission. This is real. This is in my place and my home. And I'm reasonably new to the technology. So whilst I've got support in the back end, you as the audience, I'll just ask you if you can be just a tad forgiving whilst I'm playing around with the platform. Okay, let's get into this because I do want to actually talk to you very importantly about networking. Okay, so let's start this off. Yes, it's working. You beauty. Okay, so how to network in a post-COVID job market, and it's the first part of several parts I'm going to be taking you through. And one of the most important things is for me to help you understand how to structure your network. And before we get into this, I just want to make sure that you're clear of one thing. Please park your questions until the end so I can get through the presentation, and then what I'll be happy to do is to answer your questions afterwards. So my first slide here is about knowing, liking, and trusting. And what's that? And you can see in the center, if people know you, like you, and trust you, they will vouch for you. Now, as you can see, let me just grab a little whiteboard pencil here and just want to play with the technology again and just show you that I call this your KLT score, your know, like, and trust. If you have a high KLT score, then what that means is that people will then vouch for you. So if people know you well, like you, and trust you well, then they'll vouch for you. And that's an important thing in terms of networking that I'd like you to consider, I'd like you to think about, and that is that the importance of how well people know you, like you, and trust you. Now, referrals are risky for people. You wouldn't recommend a stranger to people. You don't know them, you don't like them, you don't necessarily trust them either. So that's a low KLT score. But if somebody that you know, that you like and that you trust, and they are high up with a KLT score, you're going to have far less risk vouching for those people, recommending those people to people that you know in your own network. And there's risk in that recommendation. So the less risk that you have to recommend somebody because you know them, like them, and trust them, the less risk you have, the more likelihood is that you're going to be recommending those people, vouching for those people. The lower that score, the less likely you are to vouch for those people and recommend them. And that's principle number one. So that's an important thing. Just think always about, how's my KLT score here? Do people know me? Yeah. Do they like me? Yeah. Have I demonstrated that they can trust me? Not sure yet. And so it's something to actually build up. But over time, you'll be able to have a strong KLT score with a good proportion of your network. Okay, on to the next slide. Now, this is an important thing. Over the next few slides, I'm going to talk to you about close ties, dormant ties, and weak ties. I didn't make this classification up. The first time I actually learned about it was through, I think, the Harvard Business Review. And there have been a number of articles about close ties, dormant ties, and weak ties. But close ties are the ones that most people, when I coach people through outplacement, that most people are most familiar with thinking about. And so most people will say, yeah, I think I can network with some people and ask my close friends or family about where I could go to next. They don't think about the other ones, dormant and weak ties. I'm going to take you through the classification of these. So who makes up your close ties? Your close ties are made up of friends, family, people who you work with, people who really know you well. Again, that their KLT score with you, your KLT score is high with them and probably them with you. So your close ties are people who you think of readily, and most people would think of those people, family, friends, work colleagues, and so on and so forth. And the advantage of that, and I'm going to get to that, the advantage of that is they're actually quite close to you. And I'll get back to this shortly. Let me just go here to the numbers, and that is that it's an approximation, but I would hazard a guess that about 10 to 20% of your contact list happens to be people who you are reasonably close to. So let's just take arbitrarily a contact list of, say, 100 names. I'm going to suggest that probably 10 to 20% of those 100 names are going to end up being close ties. Onto this slide here, which is positive implications of networking with close ties, is that it's easy to approach these people. Close ties are easy to approach. They know you, they like you, they trust you. And so if you picked up the phone and actually spoke with those people, you'd be in a position where they'd pick up the phone, they'd say hi, and they'd be willing to help you out. Maybe not immediately, but certainly they'd be open to helping you out. And so there's a high leverage that you'd actually have with close ties. The positive thing is that they're going to be willing to help you out, and you don't have to establish a know, like, and trust factor with them whatsoever. Your KLT score is high. The negative implications of networking with close ties are several. One is they're smaller in number compared to the overall contact base that you have. The second thing about close ties is that close ties end up being, they have the same, let's call it, information pools. Because you're close to them, they may frankly circulate in similar circles to you, which basically means they're going to get similar information to you, which means that you may already have a similar pool of news about what job opportunities that may be out and about. And so they're unlikely to be hugely diverse in the new news about what job opportunities are about, but they are really good and readily necessary for you to be able to network with. They're also ones that pose low risk to you to make mistakes with, because they'll give you a lot more leeway. Okay, let's go on to what dormant ties are. Now, dormant ties are ties, connections that have gone to sleep, dormant, gone to sleep. And there's a range of people who have gone to sleep. Maybe, for example, you've worked until recently in a job, and those people may have moved on maybe a year ago to another job. That's not hugely dormant, but it's somewhat dormant. And it just doesn't take a lot to reawaken a dormant tie at that end. On the other side, you may actually have people who you used to work with, but you haven't been in touch with for a long, long time. And they are significantly more dormant than the first example I've given you. And dormant ties still are, in terms of the KLT score, very good chance that they know you, that they like you, and they trust you. And so it doesn't take much to reactivate that particular tie, that connection. Now, in my estimation, take the archetypal list of 100 names on your contacts. I would say probably about 40% of that contact base happens to be dormant ties. I know in my circumstances, the busyness of life means that I'm not in touch with a whole lot of people. I really like them. They like me, thankfully, but they, and so if you're quite similar to me, you've probably got a lot more dormant ties than your close ties. And again, depending on the level of dormancy, it's not that difficult to be able to reactivate those people. Now, why these connections gone to sleep? Pure and simply the busyness of life. And they've moved on, you've moved on. So what are the positive implications of networking with dormant ties? The positive implications are that they're easy to reactivate if they're relatively fresh, and not impossible to reactivate if they've gone a long time. I'll give you an example of a guy who I'm quite close to, but for years I hadn't been in touch with him. It's very common to feel quite awkward in picking up the phone or reaching out to people. And so, but what I did was, as an extrovert, I thought, I actually thought of this particular guy, called him up. His name is Brett. And I said, Brett, how's it going? He said, Greg, nice to hear from you. And we got to chatting a little bit. And over a genuine few minutes of reconnecting, we remembered how much we liked each other. And it wasn't hard for us to then graduate to a lunch and a drink. And we catch up now once every 3 months. And the nice thing is with Brett is that I do that, and I've now reactivated the dormant to become to that next category along, which is close, the first one. So that's the positive implications of networking with dormant ties. The negative happens to actually be around the fact that it may be that they are difficult to reconnect with. And you may feel a little bit awkward about that. So a little bit later on, what I'll do is I'll talk about how you might be able to reactivate through that awkwardness. But with regards to the positive side of things, let me just go back to this, and that is that different to the close ties, you don't bump into these people who are dormant because otherwise you'd bump into them. They'd be a lot closer to you. The nice thing is that they have a very different information pool that they circulate in. They get different information to you. And that means that the opportunities when you're networking with dormant ties is that you'll find jobs out there that they will know of that you would never have known from just your close ties. So dormant ties are particularly important for you to be able to network with. What are weak ties? An example of weak ties may be that you saw somebody at a barbecue or a pub or at a networking event or something similar to that. And the weak ties are people who you might have exchanged a business card with or telephone numbers or even just reached out through LinkedIn. And so weak ties are important as well, but they're not necessarily easy or even fruitful immediately for you to be able to get a relationship with these people. These people account for a good, probably 50+% of the contact list out of 100. Most of them, if you're similar to me, most people who are weak ties are, most people on your contact list having a weak ties. And the positive implications of networking with them happens to be that because they're weak, they have, and you don't bump into them, they have completely fresh and new information about what's out there. They circulate in completely different areas and circles. And so the information about what's out there as far as jobs are concerned is fresh to you. You would never have got onto those people or found out about, sorry, you would never have got onto the job opportunity if you hadn't heard from those particular people or connected with those particular people. The downside of networking with weak ties is that because your KLT score, your level of know, like, and trust is way down. They only met you once. They may know you. They may even like you, but they don't know yet to trust you. So there's some work to be done in these areas. Okay. So just to repeat, what we have is we have close ties, dormant ties, weak ties. And what I want to be able to do is now take you through to how to analyze these particular connections. Okay, now I'd like you to first think through various parts of your life. It may be, frankly, simple just to go onto your phone and to just take a spreadsheet out and start to alphabetically array. An alternative could be that you may not have a fully exhaustive list in your phone or on LinkedIn or on Facebook, whatever it is. So this slide here represents a prompt for you to be able to think through family members or people that you've met through financial arrangements, your banker, your financial planner, and so on. It may be alumni from school or university. It may be people that you've met on holiday. It may be through social arrangements or hobbies and interests that you might have. It may be through sport, your own or your kids or whatever it is. It may also be through work now or in the past. It also may be through volunteer work and doing things on those particular lines. But whatever spheres of your life, the whole idea is to actually build up a large number of contacts because you never know who you might think of, but also what opportunities these people know about. And what I'd like you to be able to do, and this is actually a very short form spreadsheet here, but what I'd like you to do is to take out, say, an Excel spreadsheet or a Google spreadsheet, and however you want to do it, whatever the technology is, as long as it's a spreadsheet. And across the top, I'd like you to write name, close, dormant, and weak. And down the rows, what I'd like you to do is to add all, I mean, really all the contacts you can think of. And so in this situation here, it's an abridged spreadsheet. But you'll see here that I've got I've got Jim, Tim, Kim, and Jane. And I'm just going to turn on my whiteboard so I can be a little bit more expressive with this particular slide. And in this situation here, what we've got is we've got Jim, who has been classified as a close tie. Let's say Jim's your brother. He knows you, likes you, trusts you, and therefore a high KLT score. And Jim has little risk in recommending you into his network, into his company, into people that he knows, in order to be able to recommend you, because he knows you, likes you, trusts you, a high KLT score that you have with Jim, and he has little risk in recommending you. So what are the types of risks? There's political risk, say organizationally. Do I know, like, and trust you? Would Jim be thinking, yes, I'm feeling okay about that. I can now vouch for Jim can now vouch for you, and therefore he's got low political risk about recommending you. There's also social risk that you can think about, people recommending and otherwise, because they want to make sure that that you don't burn their network that's taken quite some years to build up. So Jim, a close tie. Who's Tim? Tim is a dormant tie, and let's reiterate again about whether he's recently dormant or long-term dormant. So if he's recently dormant, it's not hard to reawaken the connection. In this situation, Tim still knows you, still likes you, still trusts you, and he will have relatively little risk in recommending you into his network or into his organization for where there might be a job. A longer term dormancy is one that will take some work. And the whole idea is to be able to nurture your contacts, to be able to take them across to here into becoming a close tie. The more you can develop a warmer relationship with these dormant people, the more you can reignite that to bring them across to being people who you know, like, and trust, who know, like, and trust you. In terms of Kim and Jane are both weak. You may only know them through LinkedIn. You may also have only met them once or twice. And they don't know you well, they don't like you yet, they don't trust you. So a low KLT score here, and it will take some nurturing for you to be able to bring them across to here. It's going to take actually a fair bit of nurturing. So the important thing is for you to be able to then focus primarily on these. Now, that doesn't mean that it's even if, and often I get a question about how big, maybe I don't actually have maybe you don't have a particularly large contact base. It doesn't matter, because the idea is that close ties can recommend you to their network, and that could be then larger. And the same thing with dormant ties. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. I want to give you an idea. I want to give you an idea about this game. I didn't make up. I didn't make this up. This is actually from Malcolm Gladwell's book called The Tipping Point. And you may have read that book. I loved it. I thought it was great. And he talks about in the so-called old days that it would take 6 degrees of separation between, say, you and the Hollywood actor Kevin Bacon. And this is quintessentially American, this particular idea, but the idea being that no matter where you are around the world, you have 6 connections or less to get to the actor Kevin Bacon. Now, Kevin Bacon's the main goal, and if you know that you want to get a type of job or an opportunity, let's call that the Kevin Bacon, okay? Bringing home the bacon, etc., etc. But let me just take you through this, and a practical example about a network. And I'm going to turn on the whiteboard again. Hopefully you can see this quite well. Again, I'm getting a bit more used to the technology. Let's just see if this works for me. Okay, let's have a look here. Here's you, and you have a diverse group of people who you know. There's Michelle, who's dormant. there's Harry who's close, and there's Oliver who's weak, just as an example. But you also happen to have Jim, who is a close tie. And in this situation, what we've done is we've reached out to Jim. You have reached out to Jim, who's a close tie. And based on what we talked about beforehand, there's a very high KLT score that you have with Jim. Okay, Jim might be, frankly, as I said once before, it might be your brother, might be a relation, Jim might be a work colleague, might be any of those relationships that Jim is close to you. And because of this, what you have then is you've got Jim, who's a first degree person, and he in turn has, I'm going to turn this back on here, just bear with me for 1 second. Jim has in turn some close ties. Okay, and you can see here, there's a close tie here, but he also, so you may approach Jim. Let me just make sure I'm clear about this. You approach Jim, and Jim, you think, I wonder if Jim's got a job in his company. And maybe he does, but maybe he might not. If he does, then that's fantastic. You get recommended into his company, and if you get into that organization, well, then it's been a fruitful connection right from the start. In this situation, he may not have the opportunity directly, but he then goes to Tony. And Tony, as you can see here, is a dormant tie. And you might say, I'm looking for something, say, let's call it a sales job in pharmaceuticals. And Jim, you think may be the right opportunity for that, but in actual fact, he doesn't have anything at this particular point in time. But he knows other people in pharmaceuticals, and then Tony is just that person who might also be in pharmaceuticals. And what he does is he approaches Tony, and in this situation, Tony is dormant to him, but not difficultly dormant, meaning that he could actually pick up the phone or email or reach out through, say, LinkedIn to Tony and say, hey, I know Jim knows you. He'd like to recommend you. And because Tony has a high KLT score with Jim, Tony will be receptive to the message that Jim provides about you. And it may even be helpful for Tony to know of you, because Tony may be looking for somebody with your skills. So that's a very important little diagram here. It gives you an idea. Now, imagine the situation where you went to a weak tie. Let's have a look here. Oliver. Oliver is a weak tie. So let me just turn that off again and turn this back on so it's not too messy. Here's you, and you decided you were going to reach out to Oliver. Do you have a high KLT score with Oliver? No. Is Oliver likely to be receptive to your outreach? Could be. Maybe doesn't have really much investment in that. There's no real knowledge of you. There's no real like of you yet. And there's no real trust of you yet. It's not an impossibility, but it's unlikely to be fruitful. There's far better lower hanging fruit in going to a close tie or into a dormant tie. And in your situation, a dormant tie would also be, say, Jess, than going into a weak tie. And the important thing here is that if what you did was you were to go to a weak tie, it's going to dead end. And in fact, if Jim went to a weak tie, the referral is going to also dead end by him going to a weak tie. So the important thing here, people, is to remember when you're networking, you network with people who are close or dormant. That's where you're most likely to get some real fruitful activity. Weak ties are going to be able to be nurtured. It's going to take a long time for them to be able to build up and know, like, and trust of you, a high KLT score. So on this, just remember a few things. One is that your contact base is going to end up being, say, 10 to 20% of your connections. Your dormant ties are going to end up being about 40% of your connections. And so based on that, you're far better off than approaching these people based on the fact that you've got high KLT scores with these people. Weak ties are possible, but it's going to take a long time to connect with those people. And if you're anything like me, a whack more than, well, most of my LinkedIn connections are weak ties. I have a smaller percentage, say 10 to 20% being close ties, and a good percentage of those people on my LinkedIn profile being somewhat dormant. Okay, so let's clear this, get out of the Q&A, get out of this and get into some Q&As. And I have actually been notified by a few people. The first would be from Jackie. Jackie wants to know, could I role play a phone call to a close connection? Yes, great question. Jackie, let me just take you through that. Let me think a little bit out loud. Okay, a phone call to a close connection would be along the lines of, hi, Jim. It's Greg here. We have a bit of a conversation, we have a bit of a chat, and given that you're now, say, been made redundant as a result of business circumstances, it's not that difficult or risky to actually open up to somebody you're close to say, look, I was wondering if I could catch up with you for a cup of coffee, have a chat. When would it work? I just want to run something past you. What do you think of me in terms of the skills that you know of me? Where do you think the direction might be of your industry may be going? I'd like to just get some insights and maybe some opportunities that you could help me think about where I might be able to go to next. So close ties aren't that difficult to approach because there's a high KLT score, isn't there? You've got the high know, like, and trust factor with your contact base. So that's actually how I'd probably approach the close connections. But it begs the question about, say, dormant connections. And let me just take you through this, because it's actually one of the things I was saying earlier in today's presentation about approaching those people. So let's assume that you haven't been in touch with people for a while and they're dormant, but they're not that dormant. It doesn't take that much for you to be able to reawaken that. And it could be along the lines of reaching out to somebody and saying, I just happen to be passing this particular restaurant or this particular place, and I thought of you. That could be one approach. The second thing could be that you saw an article online or in the press or whatever it is, and it could be that it's genuinely of interest to somebody. So you could actually write out to that person through LinkedIn or through email, and you'd be in a position where you could say is, hey, I saw this particular article and I thought of you, or I was driving past this particular place and I thought of you. And it's and so it creates a little bit of an easy way of being able to ease back into this relationship, to go from dormancy to maybe reignite something to somewhat close. What happens if you're feeling rather orkies, considerably awkward about approaching people because you haven't been in touch with them for quite some time? I'm an extrovert and I still feel awkward that I haven't been in touch with a lot of people for quite some time because of the busyness of business. And I would honestly say to you, I do feel awkward about it, but I think, okay, what's the value add that I can provide to somebody? What might be interesting to actually have a look at about reigniting that conversation? Instead of just picking up the phone and saying, hi, long time no speak, A good approach might be, for example, to have a look at what they've posted, say, up on what they're doing on LinkedIn, what they may have posted themselves on LinkedIn, what they may have commented on LinkedIn. And then what you could do is you could actually have those insights, but it could also be if you assume, for example, that there's something that's really interesting to their job itself or their industry, you could find something. And in that same way that we talked about warming up your most recently dormant people, you could then provide them with some content. And by just doing that and just saying, look, I saw this, I thought of you, and we haven't been in touch with a while, but this made me think of you. There's a good chance that your dormant contact, because you have a high KLT score with those people, will actually pick up the phone and say hi, or email you to say hi, or connect with you through LinkedIn and say hi, and then you're off to the races in terms of reigniting that relationship. And the whole idea is to be able to move people from dormant across to close so that you can start to really help to draw upon that networking. Again, when people remember who you are, and they know you, they like you, they trust you, and they can then pigeonhole you to think, okay, there's a pharmaceutical job in sales that's available. Oh, they need somebody. I can remember you for that job. They can remember you for that job. So does that make sense? I hope that does. I hope that answers. Yes, got that. Great. Okay, another, as we were talking, got another email, which was about the approach. Well, we've talked about that. What about yes, okay, here's a good question, and it was to do with about articulating what it is that you're looking for. Now, I mentioned here that I've written a book about So Your Career Confused, WTF is Next, and I've rewritten this for a post-pandemic environment. And why I mention this particular book, this one, is because it actually helps you work out. So rewinding a little bit, half the people that go through our program are career confused, and half the people know what they want. When you know what it is that you want, it's easy then to articulate to your network what it is that you want them to look out for you for. If you're career confused, it's far better for you to be less career confused and to have a more refined message. I like to mention about Nina, who I used to work with. So I had a previous business, and that business was about professional development for HR directors. And to cut a long story short, Nina was one of my facilitators, and I remember her saying something that really struck with me, and that was that Nina said to me, and because she only worked 2 half days every, say, month with us, she said, Greg, you've got to remember that your business is a big part of your life, but a small part of my life, said Nina to me. And Greg, my life is a big part of, she said to me, her life is a big part of her life, but a small part of my life. And we've got to remember that. In other words, why is that relevant? And that is that we have to remember that the busyness of life means that everything gets in everybody else's way. But as long as what we can do is we can remember somebody accurately for what they actually do or what they want, then it's in that situation that that individual can then say, I've heard of the right person. That person is Nina, for example. That person is Leonie, and I think they're fantastic because because they, frankly, they're close to you, they like you, they trust you, and vice versa. So you can actually vouch for that person. So the long and short of it is that the more narrow, the less confused you are, the better it is for people to then be approached in your network. So I hope that one answers that. Okay. Any other questions that you might actually have? I can just see here. Yeah. Okay, I just want to reiterate how important networking is. 80% of the job market is hidden. Networks, particularly nowadays moving forward, recommendations are just hugely critical. The reality is that if you network effectively, you could frankly create a market of one, you for that job. Because if somebody who's recommending you for that job has high cred with the person that they're talking to about you, then they're prepared to actually say, well, if Tracy recommends that you, then, and I really like Tracy, then if you work out well, if you're good, we're going to just hire you. So shortlist of one, they don't have to go through a recruitment firm or anything along those particular lines. The other advantage about going through, about networking, is that you don't have to be on a short list. There'll be times when you actually have to go through recruiters, and recruiters play a very important role. But if you network effectively well, what you're going to do is you're going to create a market of one, you. You will be in that market. You'll actually be considered to be that person. And from my own personal experience, I've found this. I may have like, if people don't know me or my business, like me or my business, trust me or my business, low KLT score in that capacity, probably the chances of me actually moving forward be in single digits out of 100, single digits, maybe 5%, 2%, 8%. But the counterpoint of this is that if I get referred from by somebody to a completely strange organization, but because that person likes the referrer and trusts the referrer, they then, if they say, speak to Greg about this particular problem, I immediately go to the top of the heap. And if I can evidence that I know what I'm talking about, they don't go to a short list. They just say, done, problem solved, deal with me. And it's the same thing with you in the job seeking market as well. Networking is very important. I want to be able to spend another time with you together about talking about triggers, about the importance of networking, about more deeply diving on this. And so if there are no other questions, no, looks like we've done pretty well here. So based on that, I look forward to meet up with you again at another webinar. But remember, close ties and dormant ties are the ones that I want you to be able to really think about approaching. First off, go to close ties. And then when you're more comfortable about skilling up and articulating what it is that you want and feeling that you can reach out beyond your close ties, then go to the dormant ties that you're less awkward with, and then stretch out to the ones that you're more awkward with. Okay, happy networking.